Live from Cannes Lions, overlooking the Crescent, you are tuned to Disruptive FM, where culture meets business. I'm Jeffrey Colon, head of brand studio for Microsoft Advertising. Now, our next guest, he's named to the Adweek Creative 100. He's recreating Jimmy John's marketing, and he's redefining a lot of this through experiential marketing. Matt Talbot, partner at Work in Progress, based in Boulder, Colorado. How are you?
I'm doing great.
This is important because we talk a lot about this on Disruptive FM. The QSR area, the quick service restaurant vertical, really fascinating for us because it's actually changing quite a bit when we compare it to 40 years ago, where you had McDonald's and Burger King and you pretty much knew what you're going to get. You have so many different restaurants now. Why are you doing what you're doing in this space with a client like Jimmy John's? Why is it so important to do things that are much more experiential driven, or for lack of a better term, stunt driven?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's QSR space, after working on it for 10 years now. It's unique in that with the companies we work with, they're franchise based, 95% franchised at Domino's, a little more than that at Jimmy John's. And it's difficult to differentiate yourself in this space based on product alone, because everyone's trying to sell a medium pizza for $6. Everyone's trying to sell a sandwich for $8. And if you just try to argue the merits of the food alone, one, it's not going to break through. It's not memorable. It's not intrinsically branded. But also, it's not going to prove how passionate you are about what you do. And so we've consistently kind of run this playbook, and we developed it over time with Domino's, which is let's take action, whether it's experiential, technology, stunts, to prove how passionate we are about pizza, and now prove how passionate Jimmy John's is about sandwiches. And it leads to really memorable breakthrough advertising that also can get some earned media, which is super important these days as less people are tuning into advertising. So, I think that's unique in the QSR space. A lot of other companies might have a different business model, especially startups or things that, are just coming out. Warby Parker, you see things like that, or Blue Apron. They have a unique business model for a certain period of time. They can advertise that difference. But with QSR, you can't just talk about the cheese and the crust.
Now, talk a little bit more in depth about the campaign itself. I think it's interesting because you're actually attacking the Uber Eats, the DoorDashes of the world because, and for our listeners and those who don't know, Jimmy John's has its own delivery service. Yeah. So why was it important to go after this message to almost attack these other services?
Yeah, they're in a new position where they are really good at delivery. And they've built that up since, in the 80s when they started. And so they've perfected that system, and they hold themselves to a really high standard that exceeds the standards of third party. So we had a lot of things going for us as far as good reasons to refute jumping on third party. And so then it allowed us to be brave and say, we will never use third party delivery, we'll never outsource our delivery because we don't trust anybody else to deliver our sandwiches the right way. And Jimmy John's is unique in that they own fast probably more than most brands own something. And so when you own freaky fast like they do, you got to live up to that. And if it's going to take 30, 40, 50 minutes, an hour, like 40 minutes on average, I think, for these third-party delivery sites, and you can deliver in 10, 15, 20 minutes, you just don't want to sacrifice that to maybe get incremental market share that eats your margins. And so it was a bold move, but we had some confidence that it was the right move.
Now let's pull out the crystal ball here for a moment. We have our crystal ball. What do you see happening in this QSR space over the next couple of years? Because it is getting more crowded. You have more regional offerings. I mean, is it just going to be a war of stunts between QSRs for our attention? Or is product also relevant in this area? What do you see happening? I mean, you've been involved in it for a really long time.
Yeah, I think, there's some macro trends of food that companies have to be aware of because that can make them irrelevant. But at the same time, people are going to want to eat pizza occasionally, so it doesn't have to be a health food, but I think there's macro trends that can kind of shift the market around and new players can come in. But ultimately, I think that you can, defend your stake in the ground by consistently, breaking through with advertising and then not dropping the ball through operations. Because ultimately, we're trying to fill the funnel with what we do with our advertising, our stunts. But if the company isn't doing well operationally, that's a reason for them to fall by the wayside. And I also think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with third party because a lot of these companies are offering discounts to QSRs in the short term to hook them in. And once those discounts go away, they're going to have a hard time justifying the financial equation to keep doing third-party delivery. And some will have to decide, do we want to take delivery in-house or do we want to drop it altogether? I think the thing people forget often is that most of the companies that are seeing gains from third-party delivery didn't have delivery in the first place. And so that adds a whole bunch of market share. And I think the last point I'd want to make on that is, what we're trying to avoid is when people go to a third-party app, it's a jump ball. They choose what they want to eat once they get there. And if we can be the most memorable, top-of-mind sandwich company, so if they want a sandwich, they go to us first. They don't go to Uber Eats and then decide. That's super important. And it's the same thing we try to do with Domino's, and it's the same thing we're doing with Jimmy John's. I think to some good success already is, if you want a sandwich, you got to just say, I want Jimmy John's, why would I go? It's the whole order book direct through hotels. They're going through the same kind of battle with third-party aggregators, and I worked on Hotels.com in the past, so there's some similarities there too. But I think that's kind of, you're going to see third-party maybe not be able to be right for everybody in the long term, and then operationally you got to keep kicking ass. And then, there's some macro food trends. So that's how I think it's going to go.
Now, technology, we got to have a conversation just about that in terms of this area and how it's being used so much by, in this vertical. Do you see QSRs getting into mixed reality, voice skills, like other areas before other verticals? I mean, sure. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I actually see QSRs experimenting in this area, but you're a creative in this space. What do you think will happen there?
Yeah, so I kind of put technology into two different buckets. One is scale, that can actually improve the ordering experience at scale. And then ideas that are not going to reach everybody, but are really powerful marketing or branding stories. So, we're going to do the same thing with Jimmy John's here. We're going to improve the conversion funnel. We're going to do some really, basic stuff to make the app always as good as it can be, so that everyone can order quickly with less clicks, get through easily, use voice. Natural voice is super crucial with that. Domino's switched to when you call the store. In some stores, you get the voice ordering robot. But then it's really important to also build technology and be a first mover for the ad story. Not just to chase trends though, but can you leverage the technology to prove how passionate you are about what you do? So, emoji ordering for Domino's, that was never about scale. It was never about how many people were going to order with an emoji. It was about making ordering as easy as possible and driving an entire quarter of advertising with that campaign with huge breakthrough and memorability. So that's kind of how I look at technology. Two ways to play it with any brand I work on. Because if you don't build things because you're afraid it won't achieve scale, you won't do some really important branding plays that can make great advertising, which is just as important as something that's the homepage of a website that everyone touches.
Love it. Matt Talbot, partner at Work in Progress, speaking to us on Disruptive FM live from Cannes Lions. Thanks, Matt, for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
You've been listening to Disruptive FM with Microsoft's head of brand studio, Jeffrey Colon.